We are WGBB, the station that serves your community.
The views expressed in the following program do not necessarily represent those of the staff, management, or owners of WGBB.
This year's divisive and frequently ugly presidential election has provided both the nation and personal households. It's turned friends against one another and caused couples to retreat into silence. The American Psychological Association confirmed election stress disorder was a real thing. Now that it's over, the question becomes, how do we begin to come together and heal, both for the sake of the country and our relationships? In case you haven't paid much attention to your calendar lately, there's a certain holiday right around the corner which seems practically tailored for confrontation with its crowded seating and abundance of food capable of flight. Within families, there are tremendous differences that people feel strongly about, and that's going to be incredibly divisive as we head into Thanksgiving. Family members are going to have to negotiate these differences among each other and with friends and family and everyone in their world. In order for those negotiations to be successful, it's important people sincerely approach those differing opinions with a genuine curiosity and treat each other with the reasonable and intelligent person. If we're not respectful, things could get ugly. If you go in and it's going to be a battle and you just want to prove that I'm right and you're stupid, things aren't going to go well. Most of us know that certain people may be more likely to needle us than others, and it's important to go into potential explosive interactions prepared. It's helpful to have a mental plan before you go in. What is the Thanksgiving meal going to be about for you? So when you leave the table, how's it going to feel? What's going to be your input? How are you going to make it happen?
Happy World Kindness Day. This is Dr. Michelle, and welcome to Late Night Parents. And also in the studio, we have Rich Valdez and the one and only Ted Hicks. Please like us on Facebook and follow us at Twitter at Late Night Parents. And we're going to jump right in because we have an action-packed show for you. And I'd like to welcome this week's very special guest. He's a psychologist, and his name is Wilfred Farquharson. Dr. Will.
Hello. How are you, Michelle?
I'm fine. So, today's topic is election stress. And I have a question. We have a bunch of questions for you, but the first one is, what exactly is election stress disorder?
All right. So, election stress disorder was actually developed as a term. It's not technically in a diagnostic statistical manual, the DSM that we use as psychologists, but it was actually developed in October 2016. So before the election results actually came out, this was developed as something that they noticed that people were going through a lot of ups and downs. It's described pretty much as an elevated level of stress, usually augmented by social media and our natural coffee break discussions that we have with coworkers. It can be identified as natural symptoms of stress like trouble sleeping, an inability to focus, pervasive worry about what's going to happen, what's the state of the union, and how things are moving forward.
But you know what? That sounds a lot like being stressed in general. So how do I know if I have it?
Right. So if you were, in particular, having a difficult time with specific events, so if like the debates were coming up and that was showing a considerable amount of stress for you, and you knew and you're having conversations and you notice that the relationships that you're having. So a lot of people were talking about, oh, I'm going to delete you on Facebook, or I'm not going to be your friend anymore because you have a difference of opinion. If it's really impacting you to that degree, then that's a definite sign that you're maybe suffering from election stress disorder.
Yes, because I've had a couple of patients, especially when the debates were on. One in particular, she was at church, and she started to have chest pain. They called the ambulance, and they took her straight to the hospital. She couldn't figure out what it was, why her blood pressure was elevated. But when she came in to me, I was telling her that's probably why. You're staying up late at night. Absolutely. You're getting stressed about all of these debates. It's not the election. The only thing you can do is go out there and vote and encourage your people to go out and vote. But once again, here we are. We had the election for 2016, and our country is very divided. So besides our country being divided, we have households being divided. I think there was something locally in New York where a whole family, Ted, what was it? They got into a brawl, and somebody was slashing somebody else, and somebody else got slashed, and somebody else got slashed.
It's really, really, really bad where someone, I guess a guy or a son, slashed his mother's thumb because they were arguing over Trump.
Right.
So I think what Dr. Michelle was alluding to is, Dr. Will, how do we begin to come together and heal both our country and these personal relationships?
Well, I think it really boils down to effective communication. And I think one of the things with this election in particular, it brought up a lot of emotions to the surface for people. And I think that's one of the things that people are struggling with the most. A lot of topics of the candidates had a lot to do with their personality and their characters. In Trump in particular, we know a lot of his character flaws came to surface.
Right.
And so that brings on strong emotions for people. So effective communication is key. I think that, people should be discussing how they feel as opposed to saying who's right and wrong. Say, well, I don't feel that this XYZ candidate is appropriate for these reasons, or this is not who I want to be the leader of my nation for these reasons. And if we start to own our things, we'll start to communicate a little bit better.
All right. So this is not the first election we've gone through.
Right.
Every presidential election cycle can be a little stressful, I guess. This one was a little more than normally, it seemed. But for other than the obvious reasons of Republicans versus Democrats, the party differences, what else do you think could be attributing to this factor?
Well, I think that there was a lot of divisive language used during the campaigning, and I think that that's what really attributed to this one being different. So when people were using terms like the deplorables, right, or calling someone a nasty woman, right. Those terms used by the candidates, struck different types of chords with people, so it became a little bit more personal for the candidates, and then, of course, people attribute that to themselves. So, if someone takes on someone calling someone else a nasty woman, that strikes a chord with another woman, now we have a battle. And so for someone else, it could easily be said, oh, well, he's just saying she's a nasty woman. Like, no, that means something. You're speaking about someone's, and then for someone else to say a whole collection of people is deplorables, it's different. I also think this election had a lot of, in the last few months, things leading up to. So obviously some of the big topic items were immigration and things of that nature.
Right.
And then we had incidents like the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, Florida, where originally it was supposed to be supposedly a terrorist act. Later, it came out that it may have been someone struggling with their sexual identity.
Correct.
But it became bigger news, I think, because of the immigration issue,
right.
And then it was obviously something that people could speak to. I even think of even more locally on Long Island, where we had in Brentwood, New York, my hometown. The very, very tragic incidents and the loss of life of 4 teenagers, where those bodies were turning up. It was local news. It was travesty, but then it became a national issue when it was alleged that the murders were committed by immigrants, that it surfaced that there was an immigration problem with this gang that they were alleging were committing the murders. Then it was on CNN.
Right.
And so I think that a lot of things that would have normally not been in the spotlight came to light this election, and I think that's why this one was a little bit different.
So I wanted to say this much to our group here, Dr. Will. To the 60,265,858 people who voted for Donald Trump, and nearly 100 million who didn't bother to vote at all, even though they were eligible. So we here at Late Night Parents want to just let the world know what they won. You know, Donald Trump now heads the Republican Party, which controls 3 branches of government, which controls the House, the Senate, and the White House. And the Supreme Court is poised to be filled with the new Republican president. How are we not to, in any way, not to be stressed out about that?
Well, I definitely think that it does. This election did have a long-lasting effect. I do pay attention to politics, but I'm not an analyst by any stretch of the imagination. But I do know that people were talking about that, like they're going to control, the Senate and the House, and they're going to control all of Congress. This next person that's elected will be, choosing some upcoming Supreme Court justice positions. And so to pay attention to that these people are at the point of where they're going to retire soon. It can be stressful to speak to that. To be worried, there are certain things that, and we can probably get into this a little bit later about how to cope and deal. But I think that overall, yes, we can be worried, but I think we still have to take action. I think folks need to pay attention to the elections that happen between, every 4 years. There's a lot of important elections that happen all the way from your school board all the way on up. And that people should be paying attention to those in particular. Right. And not the ones that just make the media and make the noise for us. I think that's what we've been paying attention to, a lot of noise this election, and not really looking at facts and key things and where our voice can be heard, and using, the people, the power of the people.
I was going to say, one of the things, especially as a parent, is that there's a lot of concern from children because some of them feel that it's the end of the world. Right. And some of my friends are teachers, and they're saying that the kids who are not necessarily born in the United States, the day after the election, this whole past week was very stressful because kids were sitting in class not worried about taking a test. They were worried about getting sent back to the country that they were born. So how, as parents, do we deal with a situation like that?
Right, and I think actually my wife brought to my attention, too, that there was a substitute teacher telling the kids, well, your parents, you may have been born here, but your parents are going back.
Really?
And so what does that mean? And then, what's going to happen to us? And the substitute teacher then said, oh, you'll just be in foster care.
Wow.
So those type of messages. And so when you have a trusting adult, someone that's in the role of an educator saying that message to our youth, of course, they're going to be nervous. So, and I think a lot of times kids they're very perceptive. They take their pulse from parents. So the more nervous we are about something, the more that we, make it a big deal. And I'm not saying that you can't show emotion with your kids, but I think that people also have to understand that there are other things in place where, yes, this is one person that's in a strong position of power, but that person doesn't control every beat of our lives. Right. And I think that, sometimes people have to look at other avenues of whether it's your personal sovereignty, like where do you find peace in other ways of the world, or because it's unrealistic to say that the election determines whether I'm going to be safe or not. There are a lot of things that determine whether we're going to be safe or not, and so there's a lot of things that we as parents put in place in our households to ensure safety. So we need to reassure our kids, mommy and daddy are going to be here. No one can just come and pick us up and take us out that way. Although there may be motions to do certain things, we'll be aware, we're going to pay attention, and we're going to do what we have to do to make sure that our ducks are in a row.
And then the other thing is you have children that are saying to other children that I see that you're going to get deported. So it's not just coming from adults, it's other kids that are repeating what they hear in their household.
Absolutely.
So, that's something that we need to be concerned about, because I remember when I was about 4 or 5 years old in church, one of the kids in my Sunday school called me the N-word, and it wasn't the nasty word, it was another N-word. And all I knew that it was a bad word, and I cried. But that's something that you don't want your children to be exposed to. But now as the climate is changing, there's an increased likelihood that they're going to get exposed to that. Because you see on Facebook, everyone is posting all these different incidents where they're getting called names and it's just getting very vicious.
Signs on water fountains, blacks, whites, telling kids, oh, you should be sitting at the back of the bus now. There's a whole lot of things that are coming out, it seems. But, I don't think it's fully or necessarily a complete change of climate. I think it's more people are speaking more what they've always thought and just didn't say it. And now it's coming to the forefront.
But then I was going to say, but why do you think that's the case, that people feel that they can just say whatever without any regard to anyone else?
Because we watched for the last 18 months a candidate
doing it right.
We watched for the last 18 months a candidate say whatever he wanted to say.
Right.
And it was okay. After each misstep, there was a little blip for a day or two, and it was just like, let's go. I wanted to jump on and piggyback off of Rich and Dr. Michelle and say, Dr. Will, personally, I'm guessing it was Wednesday evening. I'm picking my daughter up from after school. And we're talking about the election. And she mentions to me, she said, Dad, guess what they were saying in the lunchroom? She said they were chanting, Trump train, get on or get run over. And when they weren't chanting that, they were saying, build a wall, save us all. And she, my daughter said to me, but what about the Latinos and the Muslims and the people that are affected by stuff like this?
Right.
So wait a second. Is this in high school?
This is in high school.
This is the high school that you paid to send your child to?
This is the high school.
So what was your reaction?
My reaction was to send a note and calling a meeting with the principal.
So this was Wednesday?
This was Wednesday.
So did you have your meeting?
I didn't have my meeting yet.
What happened?
It's currently in flux, and I'm slated to go on Tuesday.
Don't pay your tuition.
Oh, of course.
Well, see, you can't. You can't hold the school accountable for that, because I mean that's what. Granted, that's what the students are yelling in the cafeteria. I think you did say it was the cafeteria.
It was the cafeteria.
Someone at the school should step in and tell them, all y'all need to be quiet, without a doubt. But you can't hold the school responsible. You can't withhold tuition for something that the students are doing.
But those kids were those kids punished or anything for what they said?
Not to my knowledge.
Or not necessarily punished. Did they discuss with them?
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
20 years ago, you could say punished.
That's right.
That's what I said. Was it discussed with them?
Well, devil's advocate, free speech. If no one laid hands on anyone, and they were just sitting there chanting whatever they were chanting, that's free speech. I'm playing devil's advocate. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think I don't know that there's a way to really censor the youth, right? But I think there is a way that an institution like a school can put things in place to,
without a doubt,
to change, to be the model for change. So, for example, should we be putting those kids in detention? Yes, we could do that, and then what will happen? They won't do it in the cafeteria. They'll do it on the bus. They'll do it on social media now, because kids have 100% access to each other.
Right.
But one thing that I would think is that you may want to consider recommending that the school do certain things, such as programming, and really talking about our differences, and really sitting down with students and saying, okay, yes, this is a possibility that some people may be deported. And what does that mean? What do we lose if some of the people that are undocumented in our country end up having to go home? What do we have to gain if we actually are able to involve them in our system as a nation? And what can they bring to the table? Absolutely. Mr. Trump says, that they're racist, they're murderers. Okay, and there's a bunch of people that were born here, whose grandfathers were born here, whose great-grandfathers were born here, that do the same thing. But there's also some people that come from different nations that bring a lot to the table that's really positive. They have skill sets, right? So the people that we're saying we're going to deport, we're going to get rid of, one of those people could, potentially come up with a cure for cancer. So why, how do we develop a system to say, okay, you're here, we appreciate you, let's work with you, join our system as a nation and contribute what you have to offer.
Dr. Well, as we're talking right now, there's a recording of Donald Trump that's being aired right now on 60 Minutes, and he's talking about either deporting or locking up to 3 million immigrants, illegal immigrants. There's been no comment or so about criminal, because I know the word criminal has been thrown out there. That's being mentioned. Vice President-elect Pence is mentioning turning down or turning back some of the rights of LGBT. As you know, in Indiana, Vice President-elect Pence is he was big on conversion therapy. I mean, this is some serious stuff.
Yep.
Who else do we have in the queue? Rudy Giuliani could be in the queue to be Attorney General. And what does that mean? Stop and frisk nationally?
National, right.
Enforced. So I just mentioned LGBT. I mentioned Muslims, Latinos, African Americans. Who else do we need to wrap up in here? I mean, this is a certain situation where it's scary. It's scary for all of us. I mean, I know there's certain things that we need to do, but I'm speaking from, just one household where we have to sit down and we had to talk about, okay, what does this mean? Have you recently run into a situation where, either any of your patients are asking you like, hey, what are our next steps?
I certainly have some patients that have expressed in this past week significant distress about where they stand, where they stand within their nation, and where the direction we're headed. So a lot of the underrepresented groups that you just discussed have been feeling stressed. We know that the LGBTQ community, their crisis hotlines have had a spike in the past week. We know that women in particular, and so to answer your question, I think part of that is recognizing these underrepresented groups and really starting to come together, right? And part of coming together, you have to recognize your privilege. So, for example, I didn't really, when the election results came out, I wasn't as surprised, right? I'll be honest. And so I think I was able to prepare myself for something like this because I saw the way that the media was putting certain things under the microscope. I was paying attention to what some of our political experts on Facebook were saying, and then I was able to say, okay, yeah, the people really do believe in some of the stuff that this candidate is presenting with. But at the same time, I don't think that it struck as much with me some of the other things that he was saying as it did with some of our women. And so there's an article in Psychology Today that really just talks about the way that women were described by our president-elect and the PTSD that people have suffered. And that directly correlates to the election stress disorder. And so recognizing our privilege, coming together and saying, okay, it's not okay for you to talk about women that way. It's not okay for you to demand that they do certain things with their body. It's not okay for you to tell people who to love and how to love them. And once we start coming together, we'll be able to start. I mean, we do have a powerful voice. Even the folks that are protesting, some people would look at that and say, well, that's silly, right? The election's already done. You're protesting. Nothing's going to change, right? And so a lot of people have said, stop crying about it and just accept it. But I think that the protesting is not for them to say, overturn the election. The protesting is them coming together. It's a way of coping. They're walking, which is exerting physical, energy, which is helpful, right? They're shouting, right? Yeah! They're fighting, right? So you have a choice, right? You're under a stressful situation, as in any stressful situation. You can fight, you can freeze, or you can flight. Some people we know that the night that it was looking like he was going to be elected, the website for Canada's immigration crashed, right? So some people were like, I'm out of here. And some people meant it. But at the same time, some people are fighting. And I don't think that fight means that people have to, really, put up their dukes and throw blows. But I think that people coming together, making noise, discussing, having empathy with one another, coming together, and just letting folks know, okay, he's still just one person. Right, we are a nation. We do have a say in how we are governed, and making sure that we pay attention to, again, all those elections from here until the next time we have another presidential election. We go to our school board meetings. We go to our town board meetings, and we go beyond our Facebook posts and our Twitter rants, right? We speak to really making some positive change.
So it sounds to me that we, as a country, are going through the grieving process.
Absolutely. That
we learned in medical school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. We're going through the steps.
For some people, it is a grieving process. For some people, it's shock. The stages are denial. I can't believe this is happening. There's guilt. Maybe I didn't do enough. Maybe I didn't vote and I should have. Or maybe I voted for a third party and everybody's mad at me. There's anger, right? There's sadness. And then there's acceptance. And in the way that you kind of go through all those stages, you usually bounce back and forth, right? We'll get reminded one time, like in the near future, like, oh my goodness, the president's making a huge mistake. The vice president's making a huge mistake. We may get angry again. We may have accepted it from a year from now. And then we may get angry again. But it's being aware of those things, being aware of those feelings, and then really it comes down to what you're going to do about it. And that's going to be different for every person. Some people may get behind our leader and say, okay, I'm going to go with him wherever he goes. There's people that are in the military that, no matter what, if he says strap up and go, they're going to strap up and go.
Got to do it.
Right. So, and it's not just about a paycheck for them, it's just what they committed to do. That's their civic duty for us. So.
What's hard is you want to say, I want to give him a chance. That's the right thing to do. But even after all of this that we've witnessed for the last 18 months, it's so hard. And I can tell you this much. For some people, the Trump election is compared to 9/11. Because the way it changed the world and it makes everyone feel unsafe. People of color, women, trauma survivors, LGBT people are having physiological flight or fight response. A lot of the rhetoric has been negative. People in these groups are experiencing it as a threat. What would you suggest to the masses?
Well, I think, again, that folks have to, and I would want to be careful, too. I don't want to compare necessarily an election to a traumatic event such as 9/11, but I think people have made that correlation.
Right.
And I think, maybe not the actual event, but the aftermath.
Right.
I know, speaking with people that live in Manhattan, work in Manhattan, and the city just had like a somber feel to it. It just felt like no one's looking at each other in the eye, no one's smiling, people are really disappointed. And then I think that, with that response, we have some choices to make of how we're going to proceed. We're trying, I spoke about the protest. I don't know. I don't have all of the answers to that. I do think, though, that we need to just be talking more. And I think people need to be supporting each other more. And I think people need to have spaces where they can be honest about their opinion, where they can, share their thoughts. And then from that usually comes ideas. So we don't really get anywhere by just talking about what's wrong. We get somewhere by talking about what's wrong. We do have to do that. I do believe that people need that process. They have to raise the issues to the surface. But then after that, it's okay. I hear you. Now what are we going to do? Or what kind of support do you need? And there's a lot of different things to do. And I know some people have already started to hit the ground. Some people have already started to talk, about coming together and just meeting on a monthly basis to discuss, what's going on. And then from that, a lot of change can happen.
I think part of it also, you have to remember, let's go back to Civics 101. The president can't do very much. Of course, you have executive order, but that's like extenuating circumstance. There are laws in place that will stop most of the things he said he would want to do. Of course, you can take things back to Congress and Senate, introduce bills, and maybe reverse some of these laws that already exist. But every politician wants to stay in office. None of them are going to go against the majority of their constituents. So granted, we do have things to worry about. He clearly has stated, the undocumented immigrants, he wants to make actions to get out of the country. LGBTQ folks do have things to worry about, pulling back some of the rights that they've earned and have been granted. But again, it's not like he can just go out there and say, all right, pull it back, not happening. It just doesn't work like that, fortunately. It's checks and balances.
Right.
And another thing that we should kind of think about, we're all here more than like 10 years old, so we've been through political cycles many, many times. The politics is a pendulum. Granted, this is the first time in, I forget, it's like 12 or 16 years where you'll have both houses and the president along with the same party. But we're coming back. It's a swing. We just had, Democratic president, and it's almost a double bubble because, of course, we had a minority president. So, from those who are on the other camp, For them, this is like, all right, this is our chance to get out there and vote. We're going to do it, and they did. Mm-hmm. And on the flip side of that is, for whatever reason, well, there are reasons, but the other side, on the Democratic side, people just didn't come out. Mm-hmm. And part of that may lead to another question, well, why didn't they? What was it about Hillary, we have to say, what was it about Hillary that not only didn't inspire her own people, but really had people saying, no, I can't do it. Not going to do it, even though she's my person, even though this guy is, saying these crazy things, even though she's my party, I can't do it. I can't vote for her. You look at the numbers. We've had the lowest number of Democratic voters in this session than happened when, it was Reagan and the crew. People did not show up. This was more people voting for who they felt was the lesser of two evils, mm-hmm. and also those who just maybe felt hopeless and just not worth it. I'm not voting for anyone. And now we have what we have.
But it was the younger people that came out and voted for Hillary in full force. So if you looked at the map was predominantly blue. But it was our generation that came out. Sorry, except for you, maybe, Dr. Will. But and maybe not my generation too. That came out and voted Trump in. So, I mean, that's real. So what is going on psychologically with people that they felt that he or somebody was the lesser of the two evils?
In 2012, Barack Obama pulled over Romney. He pulled 6.5 million more voters than Hillary Clinton this time. Mm. So I think... we could put it out on the table on why she didn't get those votes.
There's some good reasons. One, she was seen by a lot of people as more of the same establishment-wise. There's a lot of baggage there. For some of it, maybe legitimate. So there were a lot of things brought up which maybe were blown out of proportion, but were honest issues. She was seen as more of the establishment. And there's just something about her for a lot of people that's just unlikable. And, on the flip side of that was, he was doing, in some respects, Trump came along and said some of the same things that President Obama said when he was campaigning. Change is a big thing. That's what this was a cycle of. It was a change from what we had for the last 8 or in some cases more years to something different. And now, for whatever reason, who knows when this will ever get explained, especially for the case of female voters, mm-hmm. for the craziness that he said again, towards women, and they still were like, that's all right. I'll give him a pass. I'm still going to vote for him against a woman. So,
well, why did you look at me when you said that, Rich?
You're the only woman here sitting in front of a microphone. The only woman in front of a microphone. That's why.
I can't tell you why they voted for him.
I wasn't asking. I was not asking.
I still just have to question the grassroots effort. Grassroots meaning in 2008, and I'm just being real. Yeah. In 2008, mm-hmm. you could not go to a street corner because someone was walking up to that street corner, mm-hmm. regardless whether the person was out there shooting dice or they were hanging out. Mm-hmm. There was someone coming out to say, hey, are you registered?
Right.
Oh, you're not registered? Okay, let me get you registered right now. And you kind of wonder, did that not happen this time?
Maybe partially. And you hear a whole lot of things. So what was Trump's message? What was his big slogan?
Make America great again.
What was Hillary's?
Strength in numbers? No, that's what's the name? Stronger together.
Right, but
Stronger together.
That didn't come off right away. You had to think about it. And even now it's like, mm-hmm. that has a lot to do with it. He made, Make America Great Again. He had the hat on. He had that hat.
He had everybody wearing hats.
He had on a suit. He had the hat. He had on camouflage. He had on a camouflage hat. That was the message clear and across the board.
Yeah, because he even had my garbage man wearing that, too.
That's what I'm saying.
You remember that story, right?
Yes, I do. So there will be a lot of questions and reasons for for why the vote turned out the way it did.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, too, just, again, I'm not a political analyst, but I think speaking from the socio-emotional piece, mm-hmm.
I
think that there was a lot of excitement about what Trump brought to the table
mm-hmm.
Because of all the changes that you said. But I also think that there was a lot of fear. And again, and I think the media putting the microscope on a lot of things And even like the Chelsea bombings where the guy was on the list but then taken off the list.
Right.
And it's like, well, his father called and said he's a terrorist and then called you back and said he's not. And then you took him off the list. Right. And then now he's harming, 25 people in one incident. So I think things like that really came again to the surface. So I think that fear is like, well, Hillary is not going to handle this, but Trump's going to build a wall. You know what I mean? So it's almost like, is he going to build a wall? Maybe, maybe not. But the thought that he's thinking that way, gets people excited. And then I think, one thing that I look at a lot of the issue with Hillary was the trustworthiness and those emails. And I think that because she wasn't necessarily trustworthy, quote unquote, people couldn't really relate to her. People were skeptical of her. And, but she had political experience. So she's not a perfect politician because there's no perfect politician. So she may have made some mistakes, but people were able to say, well, you messed up when you were in a position of power, and he hasn't messed up in politics because he hasn't been in politics, right? So it's kind of like those things were all, again, brought to the surface. And one thing that I think of, when I compare Barack Obama's campaign to Mr. Trump's campaign, and I think why they were both successful, I think that Barack Obama had brought a lot of visions of inclusive, and I think he gave people dreams of being an inclusive America, whereas I think Donald Trump really brought hopes and dreams of having an exclusive America, and really, making America great again, which means, putting it back to its original form. And we kind of can speculate what he meant by that. But really, right, well, but I think that was a major difference. So people were saying, okay, enough is enough of being inclusive and even with the healthcare and taking care of everybody else. Let's get back to being exclusive and, take care of yourself and you'll be fine. So I think that those messages, people were pushed to the other side.
Rural America got the message.
And took it and ran with it. And took the selection.
I just wanted to segue for a second and thank our sponsor, our featured sponsor, Verizon Fios, Dr. Michelle, Dr. Will, Rich. Wanted to let you guys know that, yes, I'm a Verizon Fios user, and I love using Verizon Fios. Yeah, this is the shameless plug part of the show. Sorry. In fact, I recently joked with my wife, Pam, that if we move, we have to find a place that has Verizon Fios coverage. To my surprise, she agreed. She actually agreed. Oh, my goodness. So not only is Verizon Fios the fastest internet service, it also has never been down with the exception of when Superstorm Sandy hit us. And indeed, when Verizon Fios gives you the same speed uploading for your files and photos, etc., as it does when downloading, as in HD movies. Cable cannot ever offer you this. Only Verizon Fios. So go ahead and make a very smart choice with Verizon Fios. Okay, that was the shameless plug. Sorry, I had to throw that one in there.
But wait a second, are you moving?
No, I'm not moving. I'm trying to be funny,
That's all I heard. Is like you're moving, so I was in shock.
If we move.
And Dr. Michelle gets a show here.
Yes. There you go.
It'll be the Rich and Michelle show.
I'm okay with that. Totally
At
okay
Late
with that.
Night Parents.
So, wanted to briefly go to our next segment, and it's called
WWDWS. What would Dr. Will say? You like that, right?
Very good. I did like that.
That's a new one.
It is new. Might run with it, though.
I'll give Ted credit.
All right.
Oh, stop. we put this together.
Gotcha.
She motivates me. She said, where's the questions? What's going on? And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm on it. 7 things not to say to a loved one in therapy. And what would Dr. Will say instead? What are the best alternative ways to say it? I'll start off with Dr. Michelle.
Oh, the one that I really, really like is take it to God. There's no reason to go into therapy because you should just pray about it.
Yeah, and and so I myself I consider myself to be a Christian.
Okay.
And with that, also consider myself to be a Christian therapist. So if people come in with wanting to talk about their spirituality, I'll talk about anybody's spirituality. I'm open, but some people in particular want to speak to someone that's of Christian faith, and so I'm fully I allow people to come in and do that. There is, though, something that's quite different when you're talking to someone that has, of a religious background versus someone that has the training, and they do have some training in with divinity schools. But I think that when you can come and speak to someone that's completely removed, right, that doesn't know your family, that hasn't raised you, they come with a fresh, new perspective, and they're going to give you feedback. And they're trained to be able to handle just about anything that you could be presenting with. And there are times where, there are situations that you find yourself in that you may not be able to find a Bible verse for, and I do believe that prayer is work. So I'm not going to say that, there's no work involved in prayer. That would be horrible of me to say and honestly untrue. But I do think that, going to therapy provides you with a set of tools that you can use, things that you can practice, one of which would be prayer. And using your faith to get through things. But I think that there's a lot more that a therapist can offer. So I do believe that there's value. I think that people that have a faith or foundation, have a very good start in treating their own mental health issues and working through things. So, yeah.
What's the next one, guys?
Why, if I'm speaking to my spouse who's going to therapy, if I'm going to say to her, well, why go to therapy? You got me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's the exact reason. There, but, a lot of people come in and say, well, that's why I'm going. But my wife is here. You're going to get me in trouble. So, but I do think that it's tough, right? So we want to help our folks. We want to solve our spouse's every problem. We want to solve our children's every problem. We want to do that for people. But again, usually, 9 times out of 10, when I'm talking with someone in my private practice, they are usually having something that may be going on internally for them, but there's usually something that's contributing in their immediate circle, in their new, family. So, and it's hard for that other person to really be there for them and to be able to say, oh, yeah, I understand what you're saying. We're going to fix it. But, if I'm talking to you, sometimes I need a fresh perspective. I'll say it again. I need someone that's removed from this situation, that's not completely invested either way, right? So to give me feedback, to help me talk through things. And a lot of times in therapy, we really do a lot of self-actualization, where you have the answers inside of you, but you got to talk it through. It's not going to come out because you get in your own head and you just keep cycling over things. And then even, if you're talking to your spouse and then you're trying to decide on making a big financial decision, your spouse is going to have their own perspective because it's going to naturally impact them.
Right.
But you're trying to maybe get out of that and make the decision for yourself of what you think is best. It's going to be hard to get that person to do that.
Well, the one that I hear all the time is, Dr. Reed, I'm not crazy, so why are you going to send me for therapy? No, that's what I hear.
Yeah.
I'm not laughing at anyone that's,
Yeah, but I mean, people do use those phrases, and I spend a good amount of my first 3 sessions with people removing the stigma of coming to therapy and letting them know that it's a natural process. Sometimes there's chemical imbalances in the brain, and then sometimes people just need someone to talk to. I spend I think the majority of the sessions that I involve myself in, it's not really, getting someone to stop hearing voices. It's getting someone to just deal with the stress and anxiety of a regular day-to-day of what they're dealing with. Getting people to realize, okay, well, if this situation's causing you anxiety and we can't bring you out of it, what can you do for yourself while you're in that situation that'll make it go by a little bit easier? It's very rarely, people that say, oh, I'm not crazy. I don't think you're crazy. I never think anyone's crazy. I don't think that you're just an angry person. I think that, a lot of times when people start talking, well, everybody says I have an anger issue. Yeah, maybe you do have an anger issue, but it's really about emotional regulation. And then a lot of times we can pinpoint things that have happened in their life that have brought them to this way of coping and dealing, right? So people that are lashing out at their family members, it's just really, this is what I've been taught of how we handle situations. So it's just kind of re-scripting how you manage and how you interact with people. So it really doesn't have anything to do with, again, quote unquote, being crazy, or quote unquote, being schizo, or hearing voices, or you're bipolar. To be bipolar, you have to have a lot of things going on for you emotionally, and your mood has to be depressed for months, and then manic for months. Bipolar is not just you have a quick change in your mood. That's something that you could be irritable for good reason. So we want to help people talk through those things.
I like that, emotional regulation.
Mm-hmm.
I have to remember that one.
That's more than what it is. More than likely what it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I say, not per se to you, Dr. Will.
Sure.
But when I say, honey, what did you say about me? I had to preface that.
He did not call you honey.
Oh,
I
he
did not
calling me
call him
honey. Okay. So yeah, a lot of times it's very, very, very important, and you find this with spouses, but you also find this when people bring their kids. What did you say about me? What are you telling that therapist? Are you going to get me in trouble? Are you telling the full story? Can I come to your next session? Well, why do you want to come? Because I want to make sure that they know where I'm coming from too. Well, if it was about you, then we'd be doing couples therapy. It's about this individual coming to me saying they want to work through some things. So I think it's very, very important. We as therapists have our guidelines for confidentiality, and they're in place for a reason. So it's important that that people respect the space of the therapy session, and not try to involve themselves unnecessarily. Now, if you're invited into a therapy session, then absolutely you should be, you should be more than willing to come and participate. But it's not necessarily, sometimes we're in there talking about you, but I'm the type of therapist, if I'm inside talking about someone else's significant other, usually there's something that person as an individual is growing from that, right? So I'm not going to just go in and have you come in and just complain about your wife for 45 minutes.
Right.
That's not really of value. Because I tell people all the time, it's not we can't get other people to change. We can change ourselves, how we respond to things, and then hopefully that response will change other people around us. So even if we're talking about you in therapy, chances are there's nothing you can do about it. So there's no reason for you. There's no reason for you to really worry about it, and just maybe unless you notice the changes and then give the feedback. That's where your part comes in.
I guess really quickly, because we're running out of time, this has really been a great discussion. What are some coping tips that you could offer some of our listeners?
Okay. I definitely believe in deep breathing, number one. I think that taking deep breaths is something you can do just about anywhere, and I think it works very, very well. And I like the term of cycle breathing. I'm going to give you guys a quick little intervention to take home.
Okay.
So what you would do is you would breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and then release it for 4 seconds. And the point is that when you're releasing it, that's where you're getting the more bang for your buck. It's the release of that breath. A lot of times, too, people that smoke cigarettes, you see people that are like chain smokers, and I needed to relax, I'm on edge. All they're really doing is deep breathing, right? Because you don't really get like a high from it necessarily, but really what they're doing is practicing the skill of deep breathing. Physical fitness at anything, going for walks, things of that nature.
Running marathons.
Running marathons.
Multiple marathons.
Just
World-class
keep
marathons.
She won't let us forget.
New York and Chicago.
There you go. See,
And you
running
still
marathon.
didn't bring in that medal, by the way.
I didn't realize you were going to be here.
Okay.
Sure,
Sorry,
she,
Dr.
No,
Will.
that's
sure
perfectly
she
fine.
did. But she saw the outline and printed it out with your name on it.
Yes, I noticed that. And brought me water.
And
And
brought you
brought
water.
water. National Kindness Day.
That's why
Score.
I like
That's
you.
right. Yep. And then other things too, and especially I just wanted to say this too about the because it was the topic of the day, the election stress disorder.
Yes.
Feel free to take a break from media. Feel
Yes.
free to take a break from social media. that stuff can be toxic to the brain. Literally, it can stress you out. It can raise the toxin levels in your body because everything, and then you're going back and forth with people. And then the only resolution you have is, I'm going to delete you. And then you brag about deleting someone who could have gotten you a job in 3 years had you know what I mean? So like, you really want to pay attention to how you're using your time. If that stuff is stressful to you, it's okay to put your phone down. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to walk in the room at work and say, hey guys, I'm not talking about it today. And verbalize that. Put that boundary up. Oh, but okay, you guys want to talk about it? I'll eat my lunch at my desk. You know what I mean? Like, you have to put those boundaries in place because people will want to engage, and sometimes you just have to put those walls up for your sake and for the relationships that you have.
And I'm going to say, some people leave their phones in their car.
Mm-hmm. Who might have done that?
Ba-dum-bum. Oh my goodness! You ever notice, Rich? Dr. Michelle always makes sure to take like one good shot before the end of the show.
That's all right.
This is National Kindness Day.
National Kindness Day.
Okay.
I was
only
just
one shot.
reminding
Right,
you.
Right, you're right.
So there's only one shot, not five.
Not five. That's true. That's true. I know we're getting ready to wrap the show, but Dr. Will, we want to definitely thank you for coming through here with your lovely wife.
And the baby that's going to be here in a
baby
couple
on
of
the
weeks.
way.
I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know if she wanted us to mention or anything like that. I'm sorry.
When is she due?
She's due December 5th.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
Congratulations. And Michelle is a beautiful name if it's a girl.
Oh my.
That's the plug. There you go.
So, Dr. Will, best ways to get in contact with you if any of our listeners wanted you as their psychologist.
Sure.
What are the ways?
Probably the easiest way to remember would be my website, which is www.farpsych.com. So it's spelled www.farpsyc.com. You can also visit my page on Psychology Today, and our office number is 631-780-4431.
Perfect. Facebook page, Twitter page, any of that stuff?
None of that right now.
So smart.
Okay.
You're
Yes,
smart.
yes,
I'm telling you. Dr. Michelle, as always, best ways to get in contact with you?
Okay. Website is www.askaskdrmichle.com. That's 1L, Rich.
You haven't seen me do 2 L's in a long time.
That's right. So www.askdrmichelle.com. Office number is 516-794-2200. That's MS Family Medicine, extension number 8. And I'm also on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram.
Wow.
And that's Ask Dr. Michelle.
Branded across
Everywhere.
various platforms. Richie V, where do we get in contact with you?
Richie V, you can get me either on Twitter at RichieV_NY. That's RICHIEV_NY for Twitter, or on Facebook at facebook.com/TheRealRichieV.
Perfect. And we want to thank everyone. I'm Ted Hicks. You can find me Real Ted Hicks or Late Night Parent. Of course, Facebook.com/Late Night Parent. Twitter and our website, latenightparents.com. Want to thank, first and foremost, 1240 AM WGBB and our newest affiliate, 107.1 WZEA in Ormond Beach. That's
Yay!
Daytona Beach,
Hello,
Florida.
We need to go down there. Road
Yes,
trip.
we do. Yes, we do. Mike, you're going to get this MP3. You better play it this week. It's probably our best show yet. Want to definitely thank you. Thanking everyone. Mrs. Farquharson, want to thank her. Of course, Scott in the corner doing video editing and live streaming the show. And most importantly, we want to thank Brian for all that he does.
The man behind the
Yeah,
scenes.
Brian.
Man behind the scenes. And as always, keep God first. Thank you, guys. God bless.
Have a good week.
See a street